Today's video takes you into the mind of a philosopher who shaped the very way we think about reality itself, Aristotle. Before psychology existed, he was already asking the questions we still struggle with today. What shapes a life? What guides our choices? What hidden causes control who we become? In this exploration, we follow his belief that every action comes from an unseen reason, and every person carries a blueprint they never fully notice. As we move through his ideas, you'll begin to see your own mind the way he did, structured, purposeful, and guided by forces beneath awareness. Section 1. The first cause behind your first memory. You've carried your first memory for so long that it feels like a small permanent island in the fog. Maybe it's a room filled with light, or a voice calling your name, or the warmth of a hand you can't fully picture anymore. But whatever shape that memory takes, you rarely question what existed before it. You accept it the way you accept the sky, quietly, without thinking about what made it appear in the first place. Yet every memory has a beginning, and the beginning is never the moment you remember. It's something deeper, quieter, and much older than the scene that plays in your mind. Think of your first memory as a door. When you open it, you see the moment your mind decided to keep your tiny feet touching the floor, the color of a curtain, the distant hum of a fan, the echo of laughter. But behind that door are thousands of moments your mind didn't choose to save, moments that shaped you before you even knew you could be shaped. Your senses were gathering information, absorbing tones, vibrations, movements, faces. You didn't know the meaning of a single thing, yet your brain was constructing the earliest architecture of you. And beneath that architecture sits the first cause, the quiet, invisible event that pushed your consciousness into forming its earliest anchor. Maybe it was a feeling of safety. Maybe it was a jolt of fear. Maybe it was the first time your mind recognized a pattern and decided, silently, remember this, you might need it later. Your first memory isn't random. The mind never saves anything without reason. It selects and discards according to a hidden logic you didn't choose, a logic shaped by biology, instinct, and the earliest emotional currents passing through your tiny body. You think your first memory belongs to you, but the truth is, it belongs to the conditions that existed around you before you understood them. Voices you heard in the womb, rhythms you felt through skin and bone, the mood of the room the day you entered the world. All of these created the groundwork. The rhythm of your mother's heartbeat, the temperature of the air, the way people held you or didn't. These are not memories you can recall, but they are memories your body kept, memories that shaped the tone of your life long before your mind had words. So when you look at that first remembered moment, you're not seeing the beginning, you're seeing the first moment your mind decided to freeze in place, like a frame selected from a film that had already been running for months, even years. And the real beginning, that unseen cause, still influences you now. The way you react to warmth or silence, the way you handle separation or closeness, the way certain tones soothe you or unsettle you. These reactions are not new. They are echoes of that first cause, still traveling through you. Imagine for a moment that your first memory is floating in a pool of dim water. Beneath it, layers settle like sediment, instinct, emotion, sensation, tiny patterns, the world imprinted on you before you ever opened your eyes. You cannot see them, but they are the foundation on which everything else sits. The memory is not the first story, it's merely the first sentence you can read, and like any sentence, its meaning depends entirely on everything that came before it. So you sit here now, carrying a memory that feels simple, but behind it stands the quiet machinery of your becoming. You didn't choose the first cause. You didn't choose the world you were born into, the emotional climate you inhaled, or the patterns your early body absorbed. But those unseen beginnings shape the tone of your life more than any conscious choice you've made since. They still shape the way you interpret the world, the way you trust, the way you fear, the way you love, the way you remember. Your first memory is a landmark, yes, but the landscape beneath it is vast and silent, and somewhere in that silence lies the first cause, still alive, still influencing, still humming softly in the background of your every thought. Section 2. The quiet forces shaping your beliefs. You move through your life believing that your beliefs are yours, personal, chosen, carefully shaped by experience and thought. But if you pause for a moment, if you listen closely to the soft currents passing beneath your awareness, you'll start to sense that most beliefs don't begin inside you at all. They start quietly, like a breeze you don't notice until it's already moved the trees. The mind learns long before it understands, mimicking long before it questions, absorbing long before it decides, and by the time you call a belief your own, it has already traveled through countless invisible influences to reach you. Think back to your earliest years. You didn't choose what words meant, or what was dangerous, or what was safe. You didn't choose the tone that made you feel secure, or the one that made your heart race. The people around you spoke in patterns, reacted in rhythms, lived inside emotional climates, and without knowing it, you inhaled all of it. These subtle forces wrote the earliest script of your understanding. A raised voice didn't teach you anything directly, yet it planted a belief about conflict. A warm embrace didn't explain love, yet it shaped your expectation of it. Beliefs begin this way, quietly, unconsciously, without your permission. As you grew, the world continued its shaping. You saw what people praised, what they avoided, what they feared, what they pretended not to fear. You watched how truth changed, depending on who was speaking. You noticed the rules people enforced, and the ones they secretly broke. You saw which emotions were allowed, and which became shadows. All of this carved into you long before you realized it. You were absorbing a worldview while believing you were only observing it. These quiet forces didn't just surround you, they sculpted you from the inside. And the mind, eager to make sense of its surroundings, fills in the gaps. It builds explanations, not because they're true, but because explanation feels safer than uncertainty. If someone treated you with distance, your mind might create a belief about why. If you witnessed fear, your mind stored it as a rule. If you saw kindness, your mind learned its shape. None of this felt like belief-making at the time, but it was. You were gathering cause after cause, quietly laying the foundations of how you'd interpret the world. Later in life, when you think you're making independent judgments, you're really filtering new experiences through an old landscape, one built from years of silent influence. That's why two people can witness the same event, yet walk away with entirely different interpretations. They're not seeing the event, they're seeing their own histories reflected inside it. Each belief has a hidden ancestry, a lineage of moments and impressions stretching back into the fog of your earliest awareness. And here's the part the mind rarely recognizes. Most beliefs survive not because they're accurate, but because they're familiar. The brain prefers the known, even when the known is limiting. It leans toward patterns it's already practiced, explanations it has used before, stories it has told itself in the quiet. Familiarity feels like truth, even when it's nothing more than repetition. So when you believe something firmly, about yourself, about others, about the world, you might actually be believing the echo of a much older force. These quiet shapers are still working on you now. Every voice you hear, every environment you enter, every emotion you witness leaves its mark. The people around you influence your assumptions without trying. Culture whispers instructions underneath your awareness. Memories nudge your interpretations before you even realize they've done it. The mind is an open window, always catching currents, always adjusting to the emotional weather around it. And in this soft, unseen way, your beliefs are constantly being reshaped. You think you're forming them consciously, but more often, you're discovering what has already formed. The world leaves impressions, your mind organizes them, and then you wake up one day thinking the conclusions are your own. So tonight, as you listen, you might begin to feel the faint outline of these forces, those quiet hands beneath your thoughts. You might notice how certain beliefs feel inherited rather than chosen. You might sense how some ideas grip you, not because they're true, but because they're old. And you might realize that what you believe isn't a reflection of the world as it is, but a reflection of the world as it once appeared to the person you used to be. In this gentle awareness, something important begins to shift. You're not trying to destroy your beliefs or replace them. You're simply seeing the hidden currents that carried them to you. And once you can see the forces shaping your beliefs, those forces no longer operate in the dark. They become visible. They become quiet companions rather than silent architects. And for the first time, you begin to sense how much of your inner world was never truly yours to begin with. Section 3. How your mind creates explanations before you notice. Your mind has a quiet talent you rarely acknowledge. It explains before it understands, long before you consciously analyze an event, before you even have words to describe it. Your mind has already spun a story about it, a story that feels natural, inevitable, and complete. Perhaps a friend ignores your message, and you immediately think, they must be upset with me. Or you bump into someone on the street, and you assume they were careless. These explanations appear effortlessly, as if they were always the only possibility. Yet in truth, they are the mind's first attempt to organize chaos, long before evidence has caught up. From the moment you first perceive the world, your mind begins to fill gaps. It is a storyteller by necessity. When your senses register fragmented inputs, shapes, sounds, movements, textures, the mind weaves them into something coherent, even if coherence is an illusion. You never consciously choose these explanations. They are automatic. They arise from the accumulated patterns of your experiences, your early emotional conditioning, the inherited tendencies you absorbed without realizing it. You think you are observing reality as it is, but what you perceive first is already filtered through explanations that emerged silently, invisibly, beneath your awareness. This process is not a flaw. It is survival. The brain prefers to generate a provisional interpretation rather than leave events unresolved. Before you know the outcome, before the facts arrive, your mind projects meaning, anticipating what is likely, warning against what is dangerous, and guiding action in subtle ways. These early explanations form a scaffold upon which conscious thought later builds. By the time you examine a situation deliberately, the explanation has already anchored itself. You do not realize how much of your reasoning is secondary, a refinement of what your mind decided in the shadows. Consider the mind's speed. Milliseconds after an image appears, neurons fire, linking it to memories, emotions, and associations. Without your consent, your mind has created causal chains, predictions, and rationales. Even if the ultimate explanation turns out to be wrong, the initial story has influenced your perception, your mood, your readiness to act. This is why two people can witness the same event yet leave with entirely different conclusions. Each mind fills the gaps with a personal preconscious narrative that seems self-evident. The subtlety is remarkable because you rarely notice the explanations forming. They are invisible architects. They arrive as whispers, "It means this," or "It happened because." The mind shapes reality into a story you can follow, long before you have the chance to question it. And once an explanation is set, it colors subsequent perception. Every new piece of information is interpreted through the lens of the first explanation, reinforcing it, weaving it into the larger tapestry of understanding. This is why first impressions linger, why initial interpretations often endure, and why unraveling them requires deliberate awareness. Even memory is shaped this way. When you recall an event, your mind does not merely replay what happened, It reconstructs it, filling gaps, rationalizing inconsistencies, creating a coherent story you can understand. You are rarely aware of this reconstruction. It feels like an accurate playback. In truth, the mind is constantly explaining, creating narratives, retroactively, smoothing edges, connecting dots. Explanation precedes awareness, and often, the awareness that follows feels inevitable because it was guided from the start. There is a deeper layer too. The mind's explanations are influenced by unseen forces that predate your conscious self. Cultural conditioning, parental guidance, societal expectations, and early experiences embed themselves into the neural architecture. Your mind interprets events according to frameworks you inherited unconsciously, long before you knew what frameworks were. The explanations you believe are yours are often echoes of histories you never lived consciously, but absorbed nonetheless. They shape your worldview, your moral judgments, and even your preferences before you realize it. So tonight, as you consider the thoughts you carry, notice the stories that arise before you even form a deliberate judgment. The mind is at work constantly, crafting meaning, connecting events, predicting causes, and guiding your behavior quietly, invisibly. You are not merely thinking about the world. You are experiencing the world through explanations that have already emerged, explanations that shaped the meaning before you could question it. Every belief, every assumption, every instant of certainty is preceded by an invisible author, writing the story of your understanding before you even notice. And once you begin to perceive this process, a quiet awareness emerges. Your mind is never idle, never neutral, always weaving the hidden narratives that shape your reality, long before consciousness arrives to approve them. Section 4. The invisible patterns you inherited without consent. Long before you understood the world, before language gave shape to your thoughts, your mind was quietly absorbing patterns, patterns not chosen, not questioned, but silently woven into the fabric of who you are. These patterns came from the people around you, from the rhythms of daily life, from the environment that shaped your earliest experiences. You never consented to them. You were far too young to negotiate, too fragile to resist. Yet they settled into you like seeds in fertile soil, waiting for the right moment to grow, silently influencing every reaction, every habit, every expectation you now carry. Consider the home in which you were raised. Each gesture, each tone, each rhythm of emotion left traces inside your mind. A slight tension in the voice of a parent, a glance filled with unspoken warning, the repetitive gestures of daily routines. These became patterns you internalized. They were not lessons consciously taught, yet they became templates for understanding relationships, for interpreting danger, for navigating social spaces. And these patterns were not neutral. They carried the weight of intention, of emotion, of history. They informed how you reacted long before you could name your feelings. Even beyond the home, invisible cultural and societal structures shaped you. Every rule you observed, every behavior that was rewarded or punished, every expectation reinforced by peers, teachers, and media, these too became part of your unconscious programming. You may recall only fragments, but your brain remembered every subtle signal. These patterns guided your attention, framed your perceptions, and silently nudged your choices, often in ways you cannot consciously detect. The influence is persistent, enduring, and nearly invisible. The uncanny aspect is that you feel as though your actions and beliefs are fully your own, yet they are often pre-shaped by histories you never lived consciously. These patterns operate like a hidden software running in the background of your mind, executing commands you do not see. You may attempt to act independently, but your decisions are filtered through layers of inherited behavior, emotional responses, and cultural assumptions. By the time a choice reaches your conscious attention, it has already been shaped and partially determined by forces outside your awareness. And these patterns are recursive. They replicate themselves, quietly perpetuating the cycles from which they originated. the way your family handled conflict, the unspoken hierarchies in your school, the subtle rewards and punishments in social settings, all of these were encoded into your psyche. You were a silent observer, absorbing, recording, imitating. Your mind stored them, not as conscious rules, but as instinctual guides, forming a structure upon which your later beliefs, fears, and habits would rest. Yet these invisible patterns are not merely limiting. They are also protective. They helped you navigate a complex world when you had no conscious tools to do so. They taught you who to trust, what to fear, how to anticipate reactions. But the cost is subtle. They shape you long after they are useful, influencing desires, biases, and choices in ways you cannot fully perceive. Your life unfolds inside an architecture you did not design, and most of its scaffolding is invisible. The most profound aspect is how these patterns interact with memory. Your mind filters new experiences through pre-existing frameworks, often reinforcing inherited patterns without your knowledge. Events are interpreted not as they are, but as they align or conflict with what you have unconsciously absorbed. This is why people can inhabit the same world, yet perceive entirely different realities. The invisible patterns you carry act as lenses, shaping perception, meaning, and response. Tonight, as you reflect on your own mind, sense the quiet presence of these invisible forces. They are not malevolent, nor are they merely relics of the past. They are the subtle currents beneath every thought, shaping the direction of your awareness without ever announcing themselves. And as you recognize them, as you feel their weight and reach, something shifts. Awareness does not erase the patterns, but it allows you to see their influence, to acknowledge that the self you inhabit is as much a product of inherited architecture as it is of conscious thought. In this gentle recognition, you begin to perceive the hidden landscape of your mind. The patterns you inherited without consent are everywhere, silent but persistent, guiding, shaping, and forming the terrain over which your consciousness now moves. And the more you notice them, the more the illusion of independent thought begins to shimmer, revealing the complex interwoven forces that have always been quietly steering you. Section 5. The loops your thoughts keep repeating. If you pay attention to your mind, you may notice something subtle but persistent. Your thoughts are rarely linear. They do not simply pass from one point to another and vanish. Instead, they circle, spiral, and return, forming loops you barely recognize. One memory triggers another. One worry sparks a cascade of possibilities. One desire echoes again and again. These loops operate beneath your conscious awareness, quietly rehearsing patterns, rehearsing narratives, rehearsing fears. By the time you notice them, they feel inevitable, like a melody you cannot stop humming, or a river tracing the same winding path over and over. The loops begin early, rooted in the architecture of your mind. Every habit, every reaction, every repeated behavior reinforces a circuit. When you encountered a challenge in the past, your mind solved it one way. That solution became a template, a loop that recurs whenever a similar situation arises. The loop is subtle. It does not announce itself. It does not require conscious participation, yet it returns relentlessly, shaping perception, guiding decisions, and whispering that the past is always the key to the present. Your mind runs on rehearsal before it ever encounters innovation. Even emotions become entrapped in loops. Fear, guilt, desire, hope. They echo silently through mental corridors. One small stimulus, a sound, a smell, a tone of voice, can awaken a chain reaction, replaying patterns formed long ago. You react as though the present contains all the answers, yet it is largely filtered through repetitive sequences your mind has learned to anticipate. Every conclusion, every belief, every fleeting insight rides these pre-existing circuits, and the more you attempt to resist them, the stronger their presence often becomes. Loops also exist in thought patterns, the ways you explain, justify, and anticipate. You find yourself worrying about the same outcomes, reflecting on the same mistakes, imagining similar scenarios, often without awareness. The mind practices what it already knows, testing old narratives, rehearsing probable outcomes, reinforcing pathways that feel comfortable because they are familiar. This repetition creates the illusion of control. By running these loops, the mind believes it is preparing, anticipating, and predicting, when in truth it is mostly replaying histories, quietly following scripts already written. These loops are not entirely mechanical. They interact with new experiences, folding fresh stimuli into old patterns, reinterpreting them through familiar circuits. A conversation with a friend can trigger a memory from years ago, which spins into fear, guilt, or hope, looping back into how you perceive the present. You may feel a sudden shift in understanding or perspective, but even this shift is orchestrated by loops quietly rehearsed in the subconscious. You are both actor and audience, participating in a performance your mind has rehearsed for years. The mind's loops also extend into the realm of belief. Ideas you trust, judgments you make, principles you hold. They all trace repeated pathways. By the time you consciously reflect, the thought has already followed multiple iterations, each reinforcing its persistence. This is why deeply held beliefs feel immutable. They have been rehearsed, looped, and internalized countless times. Even when evidence suggests otherwise, the loops remain resilient, quietly resisting interruption, because repetition breeds stability more than truth ever could. Sleep and dreams illustrate loops vividly. As you drift, your mind often cycles through patterns from the day, threading them with older experiences, emotions, and fears. Even in unconscious states, loops persist, shaping imagery, mood, and recall. When you awaken, the echoes linger, subtly guiding perception and choice. The loops are omnipresent, bridging past and present, conscious and subconscious, memory and anticipation. Tonight, as you listen, sense the loops in your own mind. Notice how thoughts return, how ideas trace familiar paths, how feelings recycle through mental corridors. Recognize that this repetition is not merely a quirk of memory or habit. It is a foundational mechanism of consciousness, quietly rehearsing the architecture of your identity. And as you become aware, you may begin to see that the loops are not simply constraints, but clues revealing the hidden causes, the invisible patterns, the guiding forces that have always been shaping every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every choice you make. In the quiet observation of these loops, awareness begins to expand. You are no longer a passive participant in the cycles your mind spins. You begin to see them, understand them, feel them, and gently trace their influence through your experience. And in this recognition, the loops lose their power to dominate without notice, becoming instead pathways of insight, revealing the silent, intricate patterns that have guided you all along. Section 6. The emotions that decide before you think. Before you even form a thought, before you articulate a reason, or weigh the evidence, your emotions have already begun their quiet work. They are the unseen arbiters of your mind, operating beneath the surface, shaping perception, guiding reactions, and influencing decisions long before your conscious self is aware. You may think you are thinking rationally, but in truth, the emotional currents running beneath your awareness have already set the stage. Every judgment, every action, every impulse is filtered, colored, and often determined by feelings that existed before reasoning ever entered the scene. From the earliest moments of life, your emotions have been forming the templates of experience. Fear warned you of danger before you could identify it. Joy reinforced experiences that felt safe and rewarding. Sadness imprinted the loss and absence that demanded attention. These early emotional experiences were encoded deeply, quietly directing attention, memory, and expectation. They acted as invisible signposts, guiding your behavior long before the mind learned language, logic, or analysis. Your emotions were your first teachers, sculpting the architecture of your responses in ways you would only later recognize. Even now, emotions continue to act as pre-conscious decision makers. When you see a face, hear a tone, or feel a movement, your brain evaluates the input almost instantaneously. Is this safe, friendly, threatening, worth approaching or avoiding? By the time your conscious mind begins to process, the emotional machinery has already nudged your perception in subtle directions. You notice your reaction as if it were spontaneous, unaware that it has been choreographed in milliseconds by the layers of emotional patterns laid down through life. Emotions also shape the narratives your mind constructs. When interpreting events, feelings act as a filter, highlighting some details while ignoring others. Anxiety magnifies threats. Desire highlights opportunity. Guilt emphasizes shortcomings. Each emotional state colors perception, biasing the explanations your mind generates, ensuring that reasoning aligns with the underlying feeling. Conscious thought follows the lead of emotion, often justifying decisions after the fact. You think you reasoned your choice. In reality, you were guided emotionally before reasoning ever had the chance to intervene. The influence of emotion extends beyond immediate reactions. Patterns of effective responses become habits that shape your long-term behavior. Repeated experiences of joy, fear, or anger train your mind to anticipate outcomes in particular ways, forming automatic response loops. Even when you consciously reflect, the emotional framework remains a silent director, orchestrating attention, memory, and motivation in ways you rarely perceive. In essence, you act according to emotional scripts written long before deliberation occurs. These emotions are not random. They are informed by layers of hidden causes. Early experiences, cultural conditioning, inherited temperaments, subconscious impressions. They all feed the emotional landscape, creating predispositions that operate beneath awareness. You did not consent to these influences, yet they govern much of your mental life. Even decisions that feel autonomous are often shaped by the invisible currents of emotion flowing from the past into the present. Tonight, as you listen, sense how emotions move beneath your thoughts. Notice how a feeling arises before a thought explains it, how subtle currents of anticipation, fear, desire, or comfort guide perception. Recognize that the mind's supposed independence is largely an illusion. The unconscious heart of experience is already working, deciding, and shaping the path your thoughts will follow. This recognition does not diminish your agency. It simply illuminates the quiet forces that have been directing your life from beneath your awareness. In this quiet observation, something profound emerges. You begin to see the interplay of feeling and thought, the silent negotiation that occurs before consciousness claims to act. Emotions are not merely reactions, they are architects, shaping the foundation upon which reasoning builds. And by noticing their influence, by gently tracing their guidance without judgment, you gain a subtle understanding of the hidden forces that quietly orchestrate every choice, every perception, and every belief. Section 7. The hidden filters that color your reality. Every moment you experience the world, you do so through invisible lenses, filters you did not choose, yet which shape perception, understanding, and belief. These filters are subtle, almost imperceptible, yet they determine what you notice, what you ignore, and what feels significant. When you believe you are seeing reality clearly, what you are actually perceiving is reality refracted through layers of prior experience, culture, emotion, and memory. Your consciousness interprets the world not as it exists, but as it appears through these hidden filters. From birth, your mind has been constructing frameworks for interpreting sensory input. A sound, a color, a gesture, or a tone of voice is never received neutrally. The brain categorizes, highlights, and suppresses information according to patterns learned long before conscious awareness. These early frameworks act as filters, emphasizing certain elements while obscuring others, often in ways that seem natural and inevitable. You rarely notice them because they operate below awareness, silently shaping reality before perception has fully formed. The filters are not just perceptual. They are cognitive, emotional, and cultural. Consider a familiar phrase, repeated adage, or social expectation. It subtly directs attention to what matters and away from what does not. Memory reinforces these filters. Past experiences teach the mind which details to prioritize, which patterns to trust, and which cues to ignore. Emotion amplifies the effect. Fear sharpens threat detection. Attachment guides focus towards safety or closeness. Desire magnifies opportunity. The result is a reality carefully curated by layers of unseen forces. These filters also explain why people perceive the same event differently. Two observers may watch identical circumstances and leave with contrasting interpretations, each unaware of the mental filters shaping their view. One focuses on danger, another on opportunity. One sees beauty, another sees disorder. Neither is wrong in a strict sense. Their perceptions are accurate through the lens of their own filters, but those filters are rarely conscious. They are inherited, learned, or absorbed, quietly directing attention and framing understanding without ever announcing themselves. Memory itself is both filtered and filtering. As you recall events, the mind emphasizes aspects consistent with prior experience, emotion, and belief. Details that conflict with the filters may be altered, overlooked, or forgotten. Over time, this reinforces the filters, creating a recursive loop. Perception shapes memory, memory reinforces filters, and filters continue to shape perception. Reality, in this sense, is less a fixed entity than a constantly filtered experience, a projection of what the mind considers relevant, meaningful, or safe. The subtlety of these filters is deceptive. They do not dictate conscious choices overtly. They work invisibly, influencing judgments, reactions, and decisions from behind the scenes. A first impression, a gut feeling, a sudden intuition, they all pass through layers of hidden filtering before you are aware of them. When you act, you are acting through the lens of accumulated filters, many of which originated long before you had the ability to reflect or critique. In essence, the mind never encounters raw reality. It always engages with a filtered version, one shaped by unseen architecture. Tonight, as you follow your thoughts, sense the filters shaping what you notice and what you overlook. Notice how some details immediately capture attention, while others fade into the background. Observe how emotions and memory bias perception, coloring the world with meaning that feels natural but is not neutral. The realization is gentle yet profound. Your reality is not entirely yours, but constructed, guided, and framed by forces often hidden from consciousness. And yet this recognition is not disempowering. By noticing the hidden filters, by tracing the subtle ways they shape perception, you gain a quiet awareness that allows choice. You begin to see the unseen scaffolding of attention, the quiet lenses coloring interpretation, and the silent frameworks through which meaning is formed. The mind, once hidden, becomes partially visible, its operations discernible, its influence acknowledged. And in this gentle illumination, reality begins to expand, not in substance, but in understanding, as you recognize the hidden colors that have always framed your view of the world. Section 8. The memories that rewrite themselves in silence. Memories are rarely fixed snapshots of the past. Instead, they are living, shifting narratives, quietly rewriting themselves each time you recall them. When you think you are remembering exactly what happened, your mind has already intervened, subtly filling gaps, adjusting details, emphasizing some elements while diminishing others. You trust your memory as if it were a reliable archive, but in truth, memory is a reconstruction, a delicate process that blends past experience with present perception, belief, and emotion. Each act of remembering is not retrieval, it is recreation, often silent, unnoticed, and remarkably precise in its subtle alterations. From the moment you first form a memory, your mind is at work. It does not simply record, it interprets, selects, and encodes according to patterns it deems significant. Details you consider trivial may be discarded, while others are exaggerated, highlighted, or simplified. Later, when recalling an event, the mind fills in what was lost, smooths inconsistencies, and aligns the memory with current understanding or emotional state. The result is a memory that feels authentic, even when it has shifted in meaning, tone, or detail over time. Your recollection is a living document, evolving silently with each retelling. The process is subtle. You rarely notice how a memory adapts to fit the self you inhabit in the present. Perhaps you remember a childhood conversation differently now, because your current perspective demands it, or a past achievement seems larger than it was, because your sense of self has grown. Even emotions influence memory. A happy moment is often remembered more vividly than a neutral one, while a traumatic event may be reshaped to make it bearable or intelligible. The mind edits the past to fit the needs of the present, silently, without deliberate intent. Memory is also influenced by external cues, stories told by others, photographs, recordings, or even casual remarks can overwrite, reshape, or reinforce what you thought you remembered. Over time, these subtle interventions integrate seamlessly with your internal reconstruction. You believe the memory is purely yours, untouched and authentic, yet it is the product of continuous dialogue between past and present, inner mind and outer world. The boundary between original experience and reconstructed memory is blurred, almost imperceptibly. This dynamic quality explains why people remember the same event differently. Each recollection is shaped not only by the original occurrence, but by countless subsequent experiences, emotional states, and interpretations. Memory is not a fixed record. It is a narrative co-authored by the self over time. What you call accuracy is largely an agreement between present interpretation and prior reconstruction. The mind quietly edits, smooths, and sometimes even erases, ensuring that each memory aligns with the person you currently are, or believe yourself to be. And yet this silent rewriting carries profound implications. Every memory you carry, every recollection you trust, is already imbued with meaning shaped by forces outside your immediate awareness. Childhood memories influence adult behavior, past failures affect present decision-making, and formative experiences create invisible frameworks that guide perception, emotion, and thought. By the time you consciously reflect on a memory, it has already been sculpted by layers of interpretation, repetition, and unconscious editing. Tonight, as you follow your thoughts inward, notice the subtle shifts in memory, the quiet adjustments your mind makes without announcement. Recall a simple event and feel how details appear, disappear, or change upon reflection. Observe the interplay between what you experienced, what you remember, and how your current self shapes that memory. In this recognition, memory becomes less a static archive and more a living mirror, reflecting both the past and the present, revealing the silent forces that continue to shape your mind. In the stillness of awareness, you begin to see the extraordinary power of memory's quiet rewriting. It is not merely a record of what was, it is an ongoing conversation between experience, perception, and self. And as this understanding settles, the hidden architecture of your mind becomes clearer. Memories are not just recollections, they are living currents, shaping who you are, influencing every thought and action, and silently directing the course of your life long before you realize it. Section 9. The choices that choose you first. Every time you feel that you are making a decision, pause for a moment and consider something subtle. The choice may have already been made long before your conscious self became aware. What you perceive as deliberate, rational decision-making is often the culmination of invisible forces shaping your preferences, guiding your instincts, and framing the options you even notice. In this sense, choices do not arise from free will alone. They are pre-selected by layers of experience, emotion, memory, and inherited patterns, quietly operating beneath awareness. The mind believes it chooses, but often, it is responding to conditions already set. From the earliest stages of life, your brain develops frameworks for anticipating outcomes. Habitual responses, learned patterns, and unconscious biases form the scaffolding upon which decisions rest. You choose what seems natural, familiar, or safe, and what feels natural is rarely a neutral option. It is shaped by countless factors absorbed without notice: early experiences, parental expectations, cultural norms, even fleeting emotional states. By the time a choice reaches conscious awareness, it has already been filtered, narrowed, and subtly directed. Consider the sensation of preference. When faced with multiple options, a meal, a path, a word, or even a thought, the mind instinctively favors one over another. You think you are weighing alternatives, but your past, your conditioning, and your emotional inclinations have already eliminated countless possibilities before reflection begins. Often the choice you experience is the final outcome of a long, invisible process, shaped by forces you cannot name, but whose influence is unmistakable. You are both observer and participant, perceiving the choice as free while it is quietly guided. Even seemingly spontaneous decisions are preconditioned. When you react instinctively to danger, excitement, or opportunity, the choice manifests in milliseconds, determined by neural circuits trained over years of repetition. Patterns of attention, emotion, and memory converge to guide the body and mind toward a response. By the time reasoning intervenes, it often serves merely to justify what has already occurred. Conscious thought rarely initiates the first motion. It observes the echo, constructs a narrative, and assumes credit for the decision. Moreover, choices are influenced by subtle social and environmental pressures. The people around you, the culture you inhabit, the expectations of society, all provide invisible nudges. You rarely see these influences consciously, yet they structure the landscape of options, steering thought and behavior without announcement. Even when you think you are rebelling, the rebellion itself may be shaped by prior experiences and inherited patterns. A familiar path disguised as autonomy. Choice, it seems, is a dialogue between self and context, conscious intention and hidden influence. This recognition extends beyond minor decisions. Larger life trajectories, career, relationships, moral stances are also preconditioned. Your values, priorities, and sense of self emerge from a lifetime of subtle conditioning, internalized narratives, and repeated emotional responses. When you make a major choice, it is rarely a spontaneous leap. It is the natural expression of invisible structures that have been guiding you all along. The illusion of absolute free will persists because the mind perceives only the endpoint, not the intricate processes that led to it. Tonight, as you reflect, sense the quiet architecture behind every choice you have ever made. Notice how instinct, habit, memory, emotion, and inherited patterns converge before you are aware of them. Recognize the silent guidance that precedes awareness, the invisible hands that frame the options you see, the currents that propel decisions long before thought intervenes. Understanding this is not disempowering, it is illuminating. Awareness of these forces allows you to perceive the complexity behind each choice, to appreciate the hidden causes that operate beneath the surface. In this subtle understanding, a paradox emerges. While choices may choose you first, conscious awareness still matters. Observing the forces that guide decisions allows reflection, adjustment, and nuanced intervention. You are not entirely captive to preconditioned patterns, but neither are you the sole architect of your actions. In recognizing the invisible framework behind every decision, You glimpse the quiet machinery of your mind, the hidden currents shaping your life before thought, and the delicate interplay between autonomy and influence that governs every choice you make. Section 10. The self you built from other people's sips echoes. Who are you, really? The question seems simple, but the answer is far from straightforward. The self you inhabit feels entirely personal, an inner identity crafted by your own choices, memories, and reflections. Yet much of it has been shaped, molded, and even constructed from the echoes of other people, parents, siblings, friends, teachers, strangers, and society at large. Their voices, actions, expectations, and judgments reverberate within you, forming patterns that you internalize, often without realizing it. You think you are living as yourself, but in many ways, you are living inside the shadow of countless external influences. From the moment you were born, you were absorbing signals. Every word spoken, every tone, every gesture carried meaning, instruction, and expectation. A simple expression of pride or disapproval left impressions far deeper than you knew. Without conscious consent, you began to incorporate these external cues into your sense of identity. The smile that indicated approval, the frown that hinted at failure, the praise that rewarded conformity. Each created a template, a model for behavior and self-perception. These early echoes became the foundation upon which your conscious self was later built. As you grew, the process continued. Social interactions reinforced certain traits and diminished others. You noticed which behaviors drew approval and which elicited rejection. You internalized the expectations of authority figures, peers, and broader cultural norms. Even subtle patterns, like the way someone laughed or sighed, influenced your understanding of social norms, humor, and emotion. Over time, these external reverberations became internalized scripts, quietly guiding choices, shaping preferences, and constructing an identity that often feels entirely autonomous, but is in fact deeply influenced by others. The echoes are not limited to direct interactions. Observing how others live, how they navigate fear, ambition, love, and failure, provides templates that the mind absorbs silently. You imitate, internalize, and adapt, creating versions of yourself aligned with these external patterns. The person you believe you are is to a large extent a collage of other people's influences, a mosaic of voices, behaviors, and expectations embedded in your psyche. Even your thoughts, judgments, and aspirations carry traces of people you may barely remember or never knew intimately. Memory plays a critical role in reinforcing these echoes. Recollections of praise, criticism, and emotional experiences replay in the mind, further shaping your self-concept. Each memory, each internalized reaction, strengthens the influence of others, subtly weaving their voices into the narrative of who you believe yourself to be. Even your ambitions, fears, and ideals may be reflections of the frameworks you inherited, rather than purely self-generated thoughts. The mind, seeking coherence, merges these external echoes into a seamless self-perception, making them feel intrinsic when they are often borrowed. Tonight, as you contemplate your sense of self, notice how much of it resonates with the voices around you. Consider the traits, behaviors, and judgments you have taken for granted. How many were instilled, reinforced, or suggested by others? This is not to diminish your individuality, but to illuminate the intricate architecture of identity. Awareness of these echoes does not dissolve the self, rather it provides insight into the layered construction that shapes thought, emotion, and behavior. In the quiet observation of this process, a subtle freedom emerges. Once you recognize the external voices woven into your self-concept, you can begin to discern which parts are genuinely yours and which are inherited. You can gently untangle the borrowed patterns, allowing for conscious selection, adaptation, or release. The self is both constructed and reconstructible. It is not a static monolith, but a dynamic, evolving structure, constantly influenced by others yet capable of conscious refinement. By acknowledging the echoes that built you, you gain the power to listen more carefully, choose more deliberately, and understand more deeply the hidden currents shaping your identity. And in this awareness, you may realize that the self you inhabit is simultaneously a reflection of others, a product of history, and a conscious entity capable of steering its own evolution, balancing inherited influence with personal insight in a subtle, continuous dialogue of being. Section 11. The questions you learn not to ask. From the earliest days of your life, you were not only taught what to think, but also subtly instructed on what not to ask. Some questions were discouraged, dismissed, or deemed inappropriate, often without explicit explanation. Over time, a mental map emerged, highlighting areas of curiosity that were safe and others that were off-limits. You learned to avoid certain lines of inquiry, not because the answers were impossible to find, but because asking them was culturally, socially, or emotionally inconvenient. These silences shaped the mind, guiding thought and perception without overt coercion, leaving entire realms unexplored, yet profoundly influential. The process begins subtly. In childhood, curiosity is natural and insatiable, yet authority figures, peers, and social structures often impose limits. A question may be met with impatience, laughter, or reprimand. Over time, the mind internalizes these reactions, marking certain topics as forbidden. The unanswered questions do not vanish. They persist as silent shadows, shaping the way you approach knowledge, interpretation, and understanding. Even when not consciously recognized, these gaps define the boundaries of what feels safe to explore. Many of these unasked questions concern identity, morality, purpose, and reality itself. The profound subjects that challenge existing frameworks. Asking why the world operates a certain way, questioning inherited beliefs, or exploring uncomfortable truths can provoke anxiety, conflict, or social friction. To avoid such outcomes, you may unconsciously suppress the urge to inquire. These mental taboos are often so deeply embedded that you may not realize they exist, yet they limit the horizon of thought, leaving unseen structures in place that quietly govern perception and understanding. Silence in questioning also creates gaps in reasoning. When certain inquiries are off-limits, the mind must fill in explanations with assumptions, inherited beliefs, or convenient narratives. These silent boundaries reinforce patterns, biases, and unexamined truths. Over time, the unasked questions become a kind of scaffold, a hidden architecture shaping knowledge and perception, directing the way you interpret experience without ever being articulated. The mind, seeking coherence, compensates for these gaps, creating explanations that feel natural but are incomplete. The emotional dimension of unasked questions is significant. Curiosity is often intertwined with fear, anxiety, or shame. The questions you were discouraged from asking may carry a subtle sense of danger. Probing too deeply threatens stability, certainty, or social harmony. This emotional inhibition strengthens the mental filters around inquiry, making certain paths feel unsafe even in the absence of explicit consequences. You learn to self-censor, quietly avoiding exploration that feels potentially destabilizing, and yet the desire to know persists in hidden ways, shaping thought patterns, dreams, and imagination. Cultural and societal forces amplify this process. Norms, traditions, and institutional authority often define acceptable lines of questioning. Certain narratives are privileged, others silenced. What is considered common sense or settled truth often reflects collective avoidance of uncomfortable inquiry. As a result, the mind internalizes both overt teachings and the subtle avoidance of taboo questions. Over time, this shapes not only what you know, but how you know, creating a framework that channels curiosity in some directions while discouraging it in others. Tonight, as you reflect, notice the questions you rarely ask, the thoughts that hover at the edges of consciousness but are never pursued. Sense the boundaries they create, the silent influence they exert on what you perceive, believe, and explore. These unasked questions are not failures of curiosity. They are indicators of the hidden forces that have guided thought throughout your life, shaping knowledge, identity, and perspective before conscious awareness intervened. In the quiet observation of these silences, a subtle awareness emerges. Recognizing the questions you have learned not to ask allows you to confront them gently and deliberately, without urgency or pressure. By shining light on these hidden corners of curiosity, you expand the terrain of thought, challenge inherited constraints, and begin to see the full architecture of your mind. The unasked questions are not threats. They are invitations, keys to understanding the invisible structures that have always guided your perception, your understanding, and the self you believe you inhabit. Section 12. The cause behind every fear you carry. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in the human mind, quietly shaping perception, thought, and behavior long before conscious reflection occurs. Every fear you carry, whether a subtle unease or a deep, paralyzing dread, has a cause. Yet that cause is rarely simple or singular. It is a complex network of experiences, patterns, inherited tendencies, and unconscious associations that have accumulated over time, silently guiding your reactions and framing what feels threatening or unsafe. Fear is rarely about the present moment. It is a resonance of the past, projected onto the now, often invisible yet unmistakably present. The origins of fear begin early. Childhood experiences, both vivid and subtle, leave lasting imprints. A sharp word, a raised hand, a sudden separation, or a dismissed concern creates a neural signature, an emotional marker that teaches the mind what is dangerous or undesirable. Even indirect experiences, like observing conflict, social tension, or disappointment, leave traces that become encoded into the subconscious. Over time, these experiences accumulate, forming a library of potential threats that the mind references automatically, long before conscious reasoning enters the scene. Fear is amplified by memory and imagination. The mind does not merely store past threats. It anticipates future ones by weaving together fragments of prior experience. A present situation, often neutral in reality, can trigger a cascade of associations, activating patterns of caution, avoidance, or alarm. This is why people sometimes feel fear in circumstances that appear objectively safe. The mind is reacting not to the external event itself, but to the echoes, shadows, and interpretations of previous encounters. The fear feels immediate, yet its cause lies in the accumulated weight of past experience. The emotional framework of fear operates largely unconsciously. Neural circuits process threat signals and prepare responses within milliseconds, often before the conscious mind is aware. Heart rate increases, muscles tense, attention sharpens, and instincts prime for action. Reason may attempt to intervene, but by the time judgment arrives, fear has already influenced perception and behavior. This explains why fear can feel automatic, overwhelming, or disproportionate. It is not merely a thought, but a deeply embedded reaction shaped by countless prior influences. Inherited tendencies also play a role. Genetic predispositions, cultural conditioning, and social learning all contribute to how fear manifests. You may carry sensitivities that echo through generations, not as conscious memories, but as instinctual responses. Social norms and expectations further shape fear. What is regarded as threatening in one culture may be neutral or even desirable in another. Your mind internalizes these signals silently, constructing a nuanced map of what to avoid, approach, or anticipate with caution. Fear is not only protective, it is formative. It influences choices, behaviors, and even identity. Avoidance patterns, Cautionary habits and emotional reactions are often guided by the accumulated weight of fear. Yet because these influences are subtle, many people fail to recognize the hidden architecture underlying their anxieties. What seems like personal weakness, indecision, or overreaction is often the echo of a complex system built over time, operating quietly beneath conscious awareness. Tonight, as you observe your mind, notice the subtle and pervasive presence of fear. Trace its origins through memory, emotion, inherited tendencies, and social conditioning. Sense how it shapes decisions before awareness, colors perception before reflection, and guides the rhythm of thought before you can intervene. This recognition does not remove fear. It illuminates it, revealing the hidden causes that have silently guided your reactions throughout life. In this gentle observation, a profound awareness arises. Fear is both deeply personal and deeply connected to forces outside conscious control. Each fear you carry is a signpost, a marker of the complex interactions between experience, memory, emotion, and inherited patterns. By noticing its presence, tracing its causes, and understanding its quiet architecture, you begin to reclaim awareness, disentangle the automatic reactions, and recognize the unseen influence shaping your mind. Fear once hidden becomes visible, not as an enemy, but as a guide, revealing the intricate web of causes that have quietly directed every thought, choice, and movement of your life. Section 13. The background noise of the subconscious. Beneath the surface of conscious thought lies a constant hum, a subtle, ceaseless activity that you rarely notice. The background noise of the subconscious. It is not silence, but a persistent undercurrent of perception, memory, emotion, and instinct that operates continuously, shaping your experience without calling attention to itself. This noise influences decisions, guides attention, and colors reality long before consciousness can intervene. Most of the time, you remain unaware of its presence, yet it orchestrates far more of your mental life than the thoughts you actively notice. The subconscious is like a hidden orchestra, with countless instruments playing simultaneously. Memories, long-forgotten experiences, ingrained habits, and emotional traces all hum in unison, creating a complex, layered soundscape. Unlike conscious thought, which is deliberate and linear, the subconscious works in parallel, weaving patterns and correlations that may never reach awareness. It silently evaluates stimuli, anticipates outcomes, and integrates information from multiple sources, all without requiring attention or effort. In essence, it is the machinery of the mind, always active, quietly shaping perception and behavior. This background noise is responsible for intuition, gut feelings, and sudden insights. When a solution appears spontaneously or a feeling of certainty arises, it is often the subconscious synthesizing information in ways that the conscious mind cannot immediately follow. These outputs seem sudden, even magical, but they are the culmination of continuous silent computation. Your conscious mind experiences the result, not the process, giving the impression that thought occurs spontaneously, when in reality it is built on a foundation of background activity that has been running unobserved for years. The noise also carries the weight of emotion and memory. Experiences you believe you have forgotten remain present in the subconscious, influencing reactions, preferences, and fears. A subtle feeling of discomfort in a familiar situation, an instinctive hesitation before a decision, or a fleeting flash of recognition, all are echoes of this background processing. Even the emotions that appear to be in the moment often originate in these layers, long rehearsed and silently integrated. What you perceive as spontaneous feeling is largely a product of ongoing subconscious evaluation. This constant activity can sometimes create tension, competing impulses, contradictory memories, or unresolved emotional conflicts contribute to the background hum that your conscious mind may interpret as stress, anxiety, or indecision. You rarely notice the origins of these internal signals. You only feel their presence. Yet by understanding that this noise is continuous, purposeful, and deeply structured, you can begin to see the mind as a dynamic system, not just a repository of conscious thoughts. Awareness of its activity provides a rare glimpse into the hidden architecture guiding experience. The subconscious also acts as a filter, prioritizing information and shaping attention. While you believe you are choosing what to notice, the background processes determine which stimuli are salient and which fade into irrelevance. It organizes sensory input, anticipates outcomes based on past experience, and subtly directs behavior to align with learned patterns. The noise is thus not random. It is the ongoing work of the mind interpreting the world, preparing responses, and maintaining coherence across the vast complexity of experience. Tonight, as you become aware of your inner landscape, pay attention to this background noise. Sense the faint, continuous hum of the mind, the subtle currents shaping your perception, and the quiet patterns influencing thought and emotion. Notice how instincts, gut feelings, and fleeting impressions arise, not in isolation, but as part of a constant, intricate symphony operating beneath awareness. These layers are always active, always guiding, always shaping the mind's engagement with the world. In observing this, a subtle clarity emerges. The subconscious is not a distant, mysterious force. It is the foundation of thought, emotion, and perception, orchestrating the processes that allow consciousness to function. Recognizing the background noise gives insight into the hidden causes behind every action, reaction, and belief, revealing the silent yet profound influence of processes that operate continuously without notice. In this awareness, you begin to understand the mind not as a passive vessel, but as a vibrant, ceaselessly active system, whose hidden currents have always guided every moment of your experience. Section 14. The stories you inherited without hearing. Much of who you are, what you believe, and how you interpret the world comes not from personal experience, but from stories you inherited, stories you never consciously heard, but which quietly shaped your mind. These narratives are woven into family traditions, cultural norms, social expectations, and historical legacies. They guide behavior, reinforce identity, and inform decisions, often without your awareness. You may feel as if your beliefs, fears, and values are entirely your own, yet many are echoes of tales and lessons absorbed indirectly over time, long before you could question or reflect on them. From birth, you are immersed in inherited stories. Every cultural ritual, parental expectation, and societal rule carries implicit narratives: how the world works, what is good or bad, who matters, and who does not. You may not hear the explicit words, but you sense the underlying story in gestures, attitudes, and repeated behaviors. These stories create frameworks for understanding life, offering meaning, caution, or guidance. They establish boundaries of possibility, shaping perception, even when you think you are acting independently. Memory and repetition reinforce these inherited narratives. Tales told by elders, stories embedded in songs, myths, or rituals. These are absorbed silently, often internalized without questioning. Over time, they become part of your mental architecture, influencing reactions, interpretations, and expectations. Even unspoken family dynamics carry narratives: the way success is valued, the behaviors that earn approval, the fears and anxieties subtly transmitted across generations. You inherit not only events, but the interpretations and judgments attached to them. Many of these stories operate unconsciously. You may find yourself repeating phrases, patterns, or judgments without recalling their source. You adopt values and beliefs that feel intrinsic, yet they are often extensions of narratives you absorbed passively. The mind integrates these stories into identity, creating a sense of continuity, coherence, and purpose. They become invisible scaffolding, guiding thought and action, even when their origin has faded into obscurity. Inherited stories also shape fear, desire, and expectation. They dictate what is dangerous, desirable, honorable, or shameful, influencing behavior before conscious thought has a chance to intervene. For example, a story about sacrifice or failure may instill caution. A tale of heroism may inspire ambition. These narratives create templates that the mind references automatically, shaping perception, motivation, and even emotional response. What feels spontaneous or innate is often the echo of a story absorbed silently, reverberating through consciousness. The subtlety of these narratives is profound. Unlike explicit lessons or deliberate teaching, they are absorbed indirectly through observation, emotion, and repeated experience. You may never consciously acknowledge them, yet their influence persists, forming the bedrock of interpretation and behavior. Even when you attempt to question assumptions, the stories you inherited continue to color perception, providing invisible context for decisions, relationships, and self-understanding. Tonight, as you observe your thoughts, notice the inherited stories that shape your experience. Sense the unspoken patterns guiding behavior, the subtle frameworks influencing decisions, and the silent narratives coloring perception. Recognize that much of what feels self-generated is actually shaped by these unseen tales. Awareness does not erase their influence. It illuminates the hidden architecture underlying thought, identity, and understanding. In acknowledging the stories you inherited, without hearing, a deeper awareness emerges. You begin to see how beliefs, behaviors, and emotions are connected to invisible histories, intergenerational echoes, and cultural patterns. These stories are not constraints. They are a landscape, a hidden network, guiding perception and experience. By observing them, you gain insight into the forces shaping your mind, uncovering the invisible narratives that have quietly directed your life long before you knew they existed. Section 15. The illusions you mistake for certainty. Certainty is a comforting illusion. It gives the mind a sense of stability, a feeling that the world is knowable and predictable. Yet much of what you perceive as absolute truth is in reality a construct, an interpretation layered over incomplete information, past experiences, and deeply ingrained beliefs. You move through life assuming that certain ideas, assumptions, and judgments are fixed, yet these are often illusions, masquerading as certainty, guiding your decisions and perceptions while remaining subtly deceptive. From early life, your mind seeks patterns and coherence. When faced with complexity, uncertainty, or ambiguity, the brain fills gaps with assumptions, predictions, and interpretations. These constructs are necessary for functioning. They allow you to navigate the world efficiently. But over time, efficiency becomes conviction. A tentative conclusion formed to simplify perception becomes a truth embedded in thought. You act as if you know, even when knowledge is partial or incomplete. The illusion of certainty feels real precisely because it reduces cognitive strain and provides a sense of control. These illusions are reinforced by repetition and familiarity. Experiences that align with existing beliefs are amplified, while contradictory evidence is often ignored, diminished, or rationalized away. Memory and emotion collude to strengthen the sense of certainty. Past successes, repeated patterns, and cultural norms embed layers of confidence in assumptions. As a result, you may hold beliefs with conviction, unaware that they are interpretations rather than objective truths, assumptions rather than certainties. The mind prefers consistency, often at the expense of accuracy. Social and cultural forces further cement these illusions. Shared beliefs, authoritative claims, and institutional narratives create a framework in which certain ideas feel undeniable. Consensus gives weight to assumptions, reinforcing the perception of certainty, even when the underlying evidence is incomplete or biased. You trust what others have accepted, and the repetition of ideas across communities makes them feel self-evident. Yet what feels obvious may be deeply contingent, a product of context, inheritance, and subtle conditioning rather than immutable truth. Even personal experiences are filtered and interpreted in ways that foster the illusion of certainty. Emotions, subconscious biases, and selective memory shape perception, giving a sense of clarity that is often deceptive. What feels intuitive or self-evident is frequently a projection of prior conditioning, emotional inclination, and learned patterns. The mind prefers to believe it is confident and informed, even when knowledge is partial, assumptions are unchecked, and uncertainty lurks beneath the surface. Tonight, as you consider your thoughts, notice the places where certainty arises. Ask yourself, what do you truly know, and what feels known only because your mind has constructed it that way? Observe the subtle assumptions that shape perception, the judgments that feel inevitable, and the interpretations that feel absolute. Recognize that the mind constantly builds frameworks to navigate uncertainty, and these frameworks often masquerade as unshakable truth. In this observation, a quiet awareness emerges. The illusions you mistake for certainty are not flaws. They are survival tools, mechanisms for navigating complexity, and guides for action. Yet awareness allows discernment. By noticing how the mind constructs certainty, you gain the ability to differentiate between perception and reality, assumption and fact, interpretation and truth. In the stillness of reflection, you begin to see the hidden scaffolding of thought, the invisible processes that give rise to conviction, and the subtle illusions that have quietly shaped your understanding of the world all along. Section 16. The forces that rewrite your identity overnight. Identity feels stable, as if it were a permanent structure you inhabit. Yet, in reality, it is remarkably fluid, susceptible to subtle forces that can reshape it almost instantly. Experiences, realizations, traumas, or sudden insights can rearrange the very architecture of who you are, rewriting beliefs, values, and self-perception overnight. What feels consistent and enduring is in fact a delicate construction, constantly influenced by internal processes, external events, and unconscious mechanisms that you may never fully notice until the shift has already occurred. The mind constructs identity from countless threads, memories, habits, social interactions, cultural narratives, and inherited patterns. These threads form the narrative of self that guides thought, emotion, and behavior. Yet this narrative is not fixed. Sudden experiences, an unexpected confrontation, a new perspective, or a moment of realization can rearrange priorities, highlight previously unnoticed contradictions, or cast old assumptions in a different light. In the span of hours, beliefs that felt essential can dissolve, and new understandings can crystallize, reshaping the story you tell yourself about who you are. External forces play a significant role. Encounters with new ideas, people, or circumstances can challenge the foundation of identity, revealing previously invisible aspects of self or external influence. Even subtle shifts in social context, acceptance, rejection, praise, or criticism can trigger profound internal reevaluation. Identity is sensitive not only to dramatic events, but to cumulative pressures and interactions, which accumulate silently until a tipping point arrives. Overnight transformations often follow such points of resonance, where multiple factors converge to spark sudden internal restructuring. Internal forces are equally potent. Subconscious processes, unacknowledged desires, and suppressed fears constantly influence perception of self. Dreams, reflections, or moments of heightened awareness can reveal inconsistencies, contradictions, or latent tendencies. These revelations may prompt a recalibration of identity, sometimes abruptly. The mind has a way of aligning perception with unconscious truth, and when alignment occurs suddenly, the result can feel like a sudden shift. The self you knew yesterday has subtly transformed, guided by processes that were already in motion. Memory plays a critical role in these overnight changes. When you reinterpret past events through a new perspective or emotional lens, your sense of self can change accordingly. An old failure may now feel like a lesson, a suppressed desire may appear legitimate, or a previously unnoticed talent may emerge as central to identity. These reinterpretations, occurring almost instantaneously, reorganize the mental narrative, demonstrating how malleable the self truly is. Identity is not a fixed archive, but a dynamic narrative constantly updated through experience and reflection. Emotion amplifies the effect. Intense feelings, shock, awe, grief, or joy, act as catalysts, accelerating the reconfiguration of identity. Emotional intensity forces the mind to prioritize, reorganize, and adapt. In the process, assumptions and beliefs that seem central may dissolve, while latent tendencies rise to prominence. The mind strives for coherence, reshaping the narrative of self to accommodate new realities. What feels like an overnight transformation is often the culmination of gradual, unseen processes brought into focus by emotional resonance. Tonight, as you observe your inner landscape, notice how identity is not a static structure, but a living, adaptable network. Sense the subtle currents that influence self-perception, the unseen pressures of thought and emotion, and the quiet reinterpretations that may already be reshaping who you are. Recognize that identity can change swiftly, sometimes overnight, guided by forces both internal and external, conscious and unconscious. In this awareness lies both humility and power. You realize that who you are is not fixed, yet this flexibility allows growth, adaptation, and transformation. The forces that rewrite your identity are not arbitrary. They are part of the mind's ongoing process of aligning perception, experience, and understanding. By observing them, you gain insight into the fluid architecture of self, the subtle currents guiding who you become, and the profound malleability of the mind's most intimate construct. Section 17. The hours your mind lives without you. Much of the time, your mind operates quietly, independently, and outside the reach of conscious awareness. You assume that your thoughts, decisions, and awareness define every moment of experience, yet a significant portion of mental activity occurs without your direct participation. During these hours, the mind observes, processes, and reacts to the world in ways that often go unnoticed. While you sleep, daydream, or focus elsewhere, your mind is alive, attending to patterns, rehearsing behaviors, and managing the intricate network of memory, emotion, and perception that supports consciousness. Consider how much of daily life occurs automatically. Walking, speaking, navigating familiar environments, or responding to routine social cues. The mind orchestrates these actions with remarkable efficiency, requiring minimal conscious input. Habits, sensory processing, and emotional regulation operate largely below awareness, creating the illusion that your conscious self is in control of every moment. In reality, your mind is continuously active, attending to countless processes without seeking recognition or acknowledgement. The conscious you is only the tip of a vast ongoing mental iceberg. Even during sleep, the mind remains busy. Dreams, memory consolidation, emotional processing, and problem-solving continue while you are unaware. These nocturnal hours are crucial for mental organization. Experiences are integrated, patterns are reinforced, and latent concerns are processed. You awaken with a sense of continuity, believing that your conscious self has been in control, yet much of the work shaping thoughts, emotions, and decisions occurred in silence, without your direction. Your mind is always awake in its own subtle, unseen ways. Subconscious activity during waking hours is equally significant. Your attention may wander, your thoughts may drift, or your emotions may fluctuate without apparent cause. These moments are not idle. They are the mind operating independently, integrating information, anticipating outcomes, and rehearsing scenarios. The background noise of cognition, the echoes of past experience, and the anticipatory calculations of future possibilities are constantly at work. You notice only fragments, while the rest of the mental machinery hums invisibly, shaping perception, decision-making, and even identity. The mind's autonomous operation explains why intuition, creativity, and sudden insight often feel spontaneous. Ideas emerge, solutions appear, and feelings arise without conscious effort. These outputs are the result of hours of silent processing, rehearsal, and integration, often occurring when you are not actively aware. Your conscious self receives the results, believing them to be novel or instantaneous, unaware of the continuous, unseen labor that produced them. The mind lives its own rhythm, quietly preparing the material that consciousness later observes. Emotions, too, are shaped during these autonomous hours. Subtle anxieties, anticipations, and emotional resonances develop below awareness, influencing behavior, perception, and thought before you can reflect on them. Your responses often feel instinctive or immediate, yet they are the result of extensive background activity, orchestrated by the mind outside conscious control. Even what you believe are deliberate emotional reactions often trace their origin to these unseen processes. Tonight, as you reflect inward, consider the hours when your mind lives without you. Sense the unseen currents shaping thought, emotion, and perception. Notice how much of your experience is influenced by processes beyond direct awareness, habits, patterns, and silent rehearsals of memory and imagination. Your conscious self observes, interprets, and decides, yet much of the foundation of thought and behavior has been prepared in these hidden hours. In this awareness lies a profound recognition. The mind is never idle, and consciousness is only one layer of a larger, ceaselessly active system. By noticing the autonomy of your mind, you begin to see the hidden scaffolding supporting awareness, the subtle processes directing thought and emotion, and the quiet life your mind leads independently. These unseen hours shape who you are, guide what you do, and orchestrate the ongoing narrative of self, long before awareness catches up to witness it. Section 18. The beliefs that survived by accident. Not every belief you hold is a product of careful reasoning, deliberate reflection, or conscious choice. Many of the ideas, assumptions, and convictions that shape your worldview exist simply because they survived by accident, repetition, or circumstance. These beliefs persisted not necessarily because they were true or useful, but because they were never challenged, questioned, or replaced. They are remnants of past influences, cultural inheritance, and unconscious acceptance, quietly guiding thought, perception, and behavior, while remaining largely invisible. From childhood, the mind absorbs beliefs from multiple sources: family, culture, peers, and education. Some ideas are repeated and reinforced, becoming central to identity and perception. Others, even if only hinted at or indirectly conveyed, may survive because they were never examined. They endure through omission, selective attention, or lack of contradiction. The mind rarely discards information on its own. Unchallenged assumptions can persist indefinitely, quietly shaping choices, emotions, and interpretations. Survival in this sense is less about accuracy than inertia. Accidental survival can occur through social reinforcement. Beliefs that align with prevailing norms, cultural narratives, or majority opinion often persist simply because challenging them would require effort, conflict, or isolation. Over time, repetition, familiarity, and unexamined acceptance embed these beliefs deeply into the psyche. Even when evidence contradicts them, the lack of confrontation allows the ideas to endure. What feels foundational and self-evident may actually be a belief that never faced scrutiny, yet it dictates perception and behavior as if it were absolute truth. Memory also plays a role. Ideas and interpretations that were once reinforced by repeated experience can linger long after their original context has faded. A belief formed in childhood or inherited from others may survive even when it no longer serves purpose or aligns with current reality. The mind integrates these ideas into the narrative of self, giving them weight and authority simply because they exist within the internalized framework of memory. Their survival is accidental, yet their influence is profound. Even beliefs that contradict conscious reasoning can persist. The subconscious mind, with its habitual patterns and emotional associations, reinforces ideas silently, allowing them to shape perception despite conscious doubt. Cognitive biases, confirmation bias, selective attention and emotional attachment ensure that accidental beliefs remain resilient. The mind seeks coherence, and surviving beliefs are woven into the narrative of understanding, often masquerading as reasoned conclusions, when in fact they endured purely by circumstance. These accidental beliefs can influence everything from personal values to social judgments, moral assumptions, and even memory. They affect how you interpret events, react to situations, and evaluate yourself and others. What feels natural, obvious, or logical may not have been deliberately chosen, but simply survived the tests of life, repetition, and selective attention. The persistence of these ideas is a testament to the hidden architecture of the mind, a system in which some concepts endure not by merit, but by chance. Tonight, as you reflect, consider the beliefs you hold that may have survived by accident. Notice assumptions that feel unquestionable, values that feel intrinsic, and judgments that seem self-evident. Observe how many of these may have persisted simply because they were unchallenged or reinforced by circumstance rather than consciously chosen. This awareness does not diminish your understanding. Instead, it illuminates the hidden currents shaping thought, perception, and identity. In recognizing the accidental survival of beliefs, a quiet insight emerges. You begin to see the mind as a dynamic system, where ideas endure through repetition, omission, or inertia. By noticing which beliefs may have survived by chance, you gain the ability to examine them deliberately, question their validity, and discern which truly align with conscious understanding. In this subtle process, the hidden architecture of thought becomes visible, and the mind's unconscious influence on perception and identity is revealed, not as deterministic, but as a field of patterns waiting for observation and insight. Section 19. The past you don't remember but still obey. Your present thoughts, choices, and behaviors are profoundly shaped by a past you do not consciously remember. Events, experiences, and patterns from earlier in life, sometimes so faint or distant that they escape memory, continue to exert influence over the way you perceive reality, interpret situations, and make decisions. Even when no recollection exists, the mind carries forward the echoes of these experiences, creating frameworks that guide behavior, shape identity, and enforce patterns long after the original events have faded from awareness. This phenomenon begins in early development. Childhood experiences, both mundane and extraordinary, form neural and emotional patterns that the conscious mind rarely revisits. A fleeting moment of praise, disapproval, or fear can embed deep impressions. The mind internalizes these experiences, encoding rules about safety, value, and belonging. Later, you act in accordance with these invisible instructions, often unaware that they originate from events you can no longer recall. The past silently instructs the present. Even more subtle influences exist. Family dynamics, cultural norms, and inherited narratives create frameworks for thought and behavior that operate without conscious recollection. Expectations learned through observation, traditions absorbed through repetition, or unspoken rules internalized from authority figures can all persist invisibly. You follow these patterns, not because you remember being taught them, but because the mind has encoded them into its operating system, guiding decisions, shaping emotions, and influencing perception without the need for conscious awareness. Memory itself contributes to this phenomenon. While conscious recollection fades, implicit memory, habits, procedural knowledge, and emotional associations remains active. You may not remember the lesson, but your body, intuition, and emotional responses continue to act as if you have. For instance, a fear of a situation may persist even when the specific incident that caused it is forgotten. A preference, aversion, or reaction may feel natural and automatic, yet it is rooted in a past that has quietly encoded instructions into the subconscious. Society and culture amplify these unseen forces. Historical narratives, collective expectations, and generational patterns influence thought and behavior across lifetimes. You obey laws, norms, and moral frameworks without fully questioning them, because the weight of inherited history has embedded rules into your psyche. Even when conscious awareness suggests independence, subtle pressures from the past shape compliance, judgment, and perception. The past continues to speak through patterns, emotions, and unexamined assumptions. Tonight, as you observe yourself, consider the subtle forces guiding your behavior. Notice habits, fears, desires, and instincts that feel innate, automatic, or unquestioned. Trace their origins to unseen past experiences, unremembered lessons, or cultural and familial patterns embedded in your subconscious. Recognize how the mind follows instructions it no longer remembers consciously, obeying patterns that have been quietly reinforced over time. This awareness does not diminish your autonomy. It illuminates the invisible architecture, guiding thought, choice, and identity. In this recognition lies insight and subtle freedom. Awareness of the past's unseen influence allows you to examine, question, and when necessary, recalibrate the rules you follow. You begin to see the mind not as a collection of isolated moments, but as a continuous process, shaped by remembered and forgotten events alike. The past you do not remember still obeys you in subtle ways, yet observing its influence allows conscious engagement, transforming unconscious patterns into deliberate understanding and guiding the evolution of the self. Section 20. The patterns that follow you into dreams. When you close your eyes at night, the conscious mind drifts into stillness, yet the subconscious continues its ceaseless activity. Dreams are the stage where your mind rehearses, reflects, and recombines experiences, emotions, and thoughts. The patterns that guide your waking life, habits, fears, desires, and unresolved conflicts follow you into this nocturnal theater. Even as you sleep, these recurring threads influence the narratives, imagery, and emotional tone of your dreams, revealing the hidden structures that shape both perception and identity. Dreams are not random. They are constructed from the mind's continuous processing. During sleep, the subconscious consolidates memory, integrates experiences, and processes unresolved emotions. Patterns that dominate waking behavior, anxiety, attachment, expectation, or habitual thought, often reappear in symbolic or narrative form. For instance, a recurring worry may manifest as repeated imagery, while persistent goals appear as quests or challenges. These nocturnal patterns act as a mirror of the mind, reflecting what is most active, unprocessed, or influential beneath conscious awareness. The emotional life of dreams is particularly revealing. Feelings that seem elusive or suppressed in waking life emerge vividly during sleep. Anger, fear, longing, or guilt may surface as symbolic representation, connecting disparate experiences into coherent narrative threads. The mind rehearses reactions and integrates experiences, often revealing connections and conflicts that go unnoticed during the day. These emotional patterns guide both the content of dreams and the subtle lessons the subconscious attempts to convey, preparing the mind for adaptive response upon awakening. Even habits and repetitive thoughts leave their mark. The loops of thought you maintain during the day, the mental habits, repeated worries, or recurring imaginings, tend to appear in dream sequences, sometimes explicitly, sometimes metaphorically. A tendency to anticipate danger, a desire for approval, or a persistent question may reappear in various forms, demonstrating the continuity of mental patterns across waking and sleeping life. Dreams do not invent these motifs. They mirror the structures already present in the mind, illustrating how deeply ingrained patterns extend beyond conscious observation. Memory and subconscious learning also influence dream patterns. Experiences that were never fully processed, whether mundane or traumatic, may recur in fragmented or symbolic form. Dreams often condense, exaggerate, or reconfigure these elements, highlighting patterns of thought, reaction, or behavior. Through repetition and variation, the mind explores alternative scenarios, tests emotional responses, and integrates experiences that were overlooked during waking hours. Dreams act as rehearsal spaces, carrying forward patterns that continue to influence waking life. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, sense the subtle currents that follow you into dreams. Notice how the mind carries forward the repetitive loops, unexamined thoughts, and emotional echoes from the day. Recognize that the content of dreams is not arbitrary, but reflects the hidden patterns that shape thought, emotion, and perception. Dreams are a continuation of waking life in another dimension, a place where the invisible architecture of the mind is both revealed and rehearsed, silently influencing understanding, behavior, and self-perception. In this awareness lies a quiet fascination. The patterns that follow you into dreams are not constraints but guides, revealing the structures that operate beyond conscious control. By observing these nocturnal repetitions, you gain insight into the forces that shape perception and identity, understanding how waking patterns are mirrored, processed, and sometimes transformed during sleep. The mind, alive even while you rest, continues its ceaseless work, and dreams offer a rare glimpse into the invisible threads that connect thought, emotion, and the ongoing evolution of self. Section 21. The causes, hidden in your every reaction. Every reaction you experience, whether a fleeting emotion, a sudden impulse, or a deliberate choice, is influenced by hidden causes. Rarely does a response emerge in isolation. Instead, it is shaped by a web of memories, experiences, beliefs, and subconscious patterns that have accumulated over a lifetime. When you feel anger, joy, fear, or hesitation, you are often witnessing the result of unseen forces working beneath awareness, quietly guiding thought and action before reflection occurs. Your reactions are tied to the past, both remembered and forgotten. A comment that triggers defensiveness may echo childhood criticism. A sudden feeling of attraction or trust may stem from early attachments or patterns learned long before conscious reasoning could intervene. The mind links present stimuli to a vast database of past experiences, automatically generating responses that feel immediate, yet are deeply informed by history. What seems spontaneous is rarely so. Every reaction carries the imprint of invisible causality. Emotion plays a central role in these hidden causes. The mind evaluates situations and generates effective responses before conscious awareness has a chance to intervene. Fear, excitement, or irritation arise from neural patterns shaped by prior learning, survival instincts, and unconscious evaluation. These affective signals guide perception and behavior, influencing interpretation of events, judgments of people, and subsequent choices. Your conscious self often only becomes aware of the result, not the underlying mechanisms that produced it. Cognitive patterns amplify these hidden causes. Habits, biases, and repeated thought loops create predispositions for how you react. Confirmation bias, learned expectations, and social conditioning all shape interpretation and behavior. You may respond in predictable ways because your mind has rehearsed these patterns countless times. Even decisions that feel deliberate are often guided by pre-existing mental structures that prioritize certain responses over others, revealing the deep architecture underlying apparent spontaneity. Subtle environmental and social cues also influence reactions. Tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, and cultural context can trigger responses before conscious assessment occurs. The mind constantly processes these signals, integrating them with past experiences and learned expectations. Your reaction is therefore a synthesis of external input, internal memory, and emotional evaluation. A hidden network converging in a single moment of response that feels immediate but is informed by layers of unseen causation. Tonight, as you observe your own reactions, notice the hidden causes behind them. Pay attention to impulses, emotional surges, and instinctive judgments. Sense the underlying patterns that have shaped these responses. Memories, beliefs, habits, and emotional residues quietly guiding behavior. Recognize that each reaction is part of an intricate web, revealing the mind's continuous unseen work in shaping experience. In this awareness lies clarity and subtle empowerment. Understanding that reactions are influenced by hidden causes does not diminish personal responsibility. Rather, it illuminates the unseen architecture shaping perception and behavior. By observing the causes behind each response, you begin to disentangle automatic patterns from conscious choice, revealing the subtle mechanisms that govern thought, emotion, and action. Your reactions are not merely random, they are the visible surface of a deep, complex network, a testament to the intricate and hidden architecture of your mind. Section 22. The weight of everything you didn't choose. Much of the life you inhabit is shaped by factors beyond your conscious selection. Family, culture, genetics, social circumstance, and historical context have all contributed to the framework of who you are, what you believe, and how you navigate the world. These unseen influences carry weight, quiet, persistent, and often unacknowledged, that shapes decisions, emotions, and perceptions. The life you live is not entirely a product of free will. It is intertwined with countless elements you did not choose, but continue to bear. From birth, invisible structures guide your development. Genetics provide temperament, predispositions, and physical characteristics, while the environment shapes habits, beliefs, and values. Family dynamics, socio-economic conditions, and cultural expectations create frameworks that influence how you interpret experiences and respond to challenges. Even your language, thought patterns, and ways of reasoning are inherited, not invented. Every choice you think is personal, exists in dialogue with these unseen forces, carrying the weight of their unchosen influence. Past events you did not select also contribute to this weight. The circumstances of birth, historical era, and societal structure dictate possibilities, opportunities, and limitations. You are influenced by political systems, educational access, and social norms that were decided long before your awareness existed. These factors often operate invisibly, yet they shape your trajectory, constraining or guiding choices in subtle ways. Even small, everyday decisions are informed by unchosen histories that remain active within your mind and environment. Cultural and inherited narratives add another layer of unseen influence. Values, moral codes, and social expectations, absorbed through observation, education, and tradition, operate beneath awareness. You may act in alignment with these narratives without realizing that your consent was never explicitly given. These inherited frameworks provide structure, guidance, and sometimes comfort, but they also carry the weight of unchosen influence, shaping perception and behavior in ways that feel natural or inevitable. The weight of the unchosen extends into the realm of the subconscious. Memories, emotional imprints, and internalized lessons influence thought, feeling, and decision-making. Patterns of fear, desire, attachment, and aversion often reflect histories and experiences that you did not consciously select, yet they govern how you perceive and respond to the present. The mind is continuously negotiating between conscious intention and the silent influence of what was inherited, absorbed, or imposed, an ongoing dialogue that you rarely notice but always feel. Tonight, as you reflect inward, notice the weight of everything you didn't choose. Observe inherited beliefs, unconscious habits, environmental pressures, and emotional legacies that subtly guide behavior. Sense the invisible scaffolding of influence beneath every thought and decision. Recognize that the life you live is a complex tapestry of choice intertwined with circumstance, a synthesis of conscious agency and unseen guidance. In this awareness lies perspective and subtle liberation. Acknowledging the weight of what you did not choose does not negate agency. It illuminates the hidden forces shaping experience. By recognizing these influences, you can engage with them consciously, discern which patterns serve you, and begin to navigate life with greater understanding. The weight of the unchosen is not merely burden. It is a map, revealing the invisible architecture that has quietly guided your mind, identity, and choices all along. Section 23. The life you build without seeing the blueprint. You live a life guided by countless unseen structures, yet you rarely glimpse the full design. Each choice, habit, and decision is shaped by forces you do not fully perceive: societal norms, inherited narratives, subconscious patterns, and unexamined beliefs. The life you construct emerges organically, as if by instinct, yet it is built atop a blueprint that you cannot see, a framework of invisible influences, silently guiding each step. You navigate without a map, unaware of the full architecture supporting your decisions and shaping your reality. From early development, the mind absorbs patterns and structures that serve as the foundation for your life. Family expectations, educational guidance, social cues, and cultural narratives form a scaffold that organizes thought, behavior, and perception. You respond to situations using this implicit framework, often without questioning its origin. In essence, you are both the architect and the inhabitant of a life shaped by patterns you cannot fully observe, constructing pathways while following hidden instructions. Subconscious influences play a central role in shaping this invisible blueprint. Habits, emotional responses, and cognitive patterns guide behavior and perception continuously, often outside awareness. The mind evaluates options, anticipates outcomes, and chooses responses based on prior learning, emotional resonance, and ingrained tendencies. Even when you consciously plan or make decisions, the subconscious shapes priorities, constraints, and preferences. The life you experience is therefore not only what you intend, but also what the mind silently orchestrates. Social, cultural, and historical forces contribute layers of unseen design. Laws, moral codes, cultural expectations, and inherited narratives shape perception and decision-making, often unnoticed. Opportunities, constraints, and societal roles influence the trajectory of life without explicit awareness. Even when you believe you are acting autonomously, much of what you achieve or avoid is guided by frameworks established long before your conscious engagement. The blueprint exists, but it is partially hidden, and the mind follows its lines without seeing the full picture. Memory and emotional history further shape this unseen architecture. Experiences, both remembered and forgotten, inform decisions and create patterns of expectation. Emotional associations reinforce certain choices and discourage others. Past successes and failures internalize judgments, and unresolved conflicts operate as invisible guides, shaping how you respond to challenges and opportunities. The blueprint of life is therefore constructed cumulatively, integrating experiences, patterns, and inherited structures, yet remains largely unseen by conscious awareness. Tonight, as you reflect, imagine the life you build as a structure in progress, constructed without seeing the full blueprint. Observe the invisible influences that guide choices, shape perception, and dictate priorities. Notice how your habits, emotions, and inherited narratives silently determine the paths you take. Recognize that while you actively participate in creation, much of the design is already present, encoded in the mind's patterns and the surrounding environment. In this awareness lies perspective and subtle insight. Understanding that life is built atop an unseen blueprint allows you to approach choices more consciously, to observe patterns, and to identify influences that previously went unnoticed. The structures guiding you are not deterministic. They are frameworks, providing stability, guidance, and context. By seeing their outlines, even faintly, you gain the ability to navigate life with awareness, shaping experience, while appreciating the hidden architecture that has quietly supported every step you have taken. Section 24. The you that exists behind your conscious self. What you call you is only a fraction of the mind's total activity. The conscious self, the thoughts, decisions, and awareness you identify with, is merely the tip of a vast unseen network that operates beyond direct perception. Beneath every choice, emotion, and memory lies a deeper self, a collection of subconscious processes, internalized narratives, inherited patterns, and unexamined tendencies that continuously shape who you are. These hidden self guides, filters, and sometimes even contradicts the conscious self, quietly orchestrating thought, behavior, and perception from behind the scenes. The conscious self is limited by attention and perception. It notices what is immediate, salient, or demanded by circumstance, yet it relies heavily on the subconscious to process complexity. While you deliberate, plan, and reflect, the hidden self evaluates context, integrates past experience, manages emotion, and anticipates outcomes. It monitors countless variables at once: sensory input, emotional states, memories, and instinctive reactions, far beyond the conscious mind's capacity. The result is seamless experience, giving the illusion that conscious awareness is fully in control, when in truth, it is largely guided by forces operating in the shadows. Memory and emotion form the backbone of this deeper self. Emotional residues, implicit memories, and unexamined beliefs influence responses long before the conscious mind registers them. Patterns of attachment, fear, desire, and preference reside in the hidden self, quietly shaping judgments, perceptions, and choices. Even when you believe a decision is rational or deliberate, it is influenced by these underlying structures, often operating invisibly, without permission or acknowledgement. The conscious self sees only the outcome, not the forces that produced it. Inherited narratives and cultural conditioning further populate this unseen self. Beliefs, norms, and values, absorbed from family, society, and history, integrate into identity without conscious intervention. These influences operate continuously, guiding behavior and shaping perception in ways that feel natural, inevitable, or self-generated. The hidden self is the repository of these inherited forces, silently managing responses and influencing experience, often unnoticed until observation or reflection illuminates their presence. The hidden self also maintains continuity. While consciousness shifts moment to moment, focusing on tasks, events, or sensations, the deeper self provides coherence across time. It connects past experiences to present perception and future anticipation, creating a narrative that the conscious mind interprets as identity. It stores lessons, anticipates consequences, and manages emotional equilibrium. The visible self, the one you experience as you, is only the conscious interface of a much larger, constantly active system. Tonight, as you reflect, sense the layers beneath conscious awareness. Notice the subtle currents of thought, emotion, and habit that guide decisions before you recognize them. Consider how the hidden self integrates past experience, inherited patterns, and subconscious processes to shape the flow of life. Recognize that who you consciously are is only a fraction of the total mind, and that this unseen self quietly orchestrates much of your experience. perception, and identity. In this awareness lies profound insight. The hidden self is not separate from consciousness. It is its foundation, supporting and guiding thought, emotion, and action. By observing its influence, you gain clarity into the mechanisms behind behavior, intuition, and perception. The you behind your conscious self is both mysterious and intimate, a continuous dynamic network shaping experience from beneath awareness. Understanding its presence allows a deeper engagement with life, revealing the intricate architecture underlying every thought, decision, and emotion you experience. Section 25. The final cause you were never supposed to notice. Every thought, choice, and experience in your life seems immediate, disconnected, and self-contained. Yet beneath this apparent randomness lies a hidden orchestration. The final cause, the ultimate reason or purpose behind your experiences, is rarely visible to consciousness. Unlike the obvious causes of events, this deeper cause operates subtly, shaping patterns, guiding decisions, and influencing perception without drawing attention. It is the underlying current that directs the unfolding of your mind, quietly pointing toward outcomes you rarely recognize until reflection brings them into focus. From childhood, your mind accumulates influences, habits, beliefs, and experiences. Each layer contributes to the unfolding of identity, yet the final cause remains obscured, hidden within the intricate weave of conscious and subconscious activity. You notice the effects, emotions, choices, perceptions, but not the deeper architecture guiding them. The mind often operates as if responding spontaneously, yet these responses are orchestrated by a purpose that is diffuse, emergent, and largely invisible. The final cause is the invisible hand guiding the unseen patterns of life. This hidden cause manifests in the convergence of memory, experience, and inherited narratives. Patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior are shaped over time, creating a trajectory that unfolds gradually. What seems accidental, spontaneous, or coincidental is often a reflection of this underlying purpose. Even mistakes, failures, or repetitive cycles contribute to a broader pattern, nudging perception, learning, and identity along a subtle path. The final cause is not imposed externally. It emerges naturally from the accumulated structure of mind and experience, steering life in ways you are rarely meant to notice. Emotion and subconscious processing are central to this hidden orchestration. Your feelings, intuitions, and instincts act as guides, subtly aligning action with deeper purposes that consciousness cannot fully grasp. Intuition, insight, and spontaneous decision-making are glimpses of the mind's internal navigation, pointing toward outcomes shaped by unseen reasoning. While you may experience these moments as random or mysterious, they reflect the influence of the final cause, an underlying tendency toward coherence, integration, and subtle alignment with long-term patterns. Even the choices you believe to be entirely conscious are shaped by this hidden purpose. Habits, learned behaviors, and subconscious tendencies create momentum, directing thought and action toward outcomes that feel inevitable in hindsight. Reflection reveals consistency, pattern, and direction that was invisible in the moment. The mind's final cause works silently, ensuring that experiences, reactions, and decisions align with a broader, often unnoticed trajectory, one that structures identity, perception, and understanding in ways that remain largely unseen. Tonight, as you reflect, consider the final cause behind your thoughts, actions, and experiences. Sense the invisible currents, shaping decisions, guiding perception, and influencing emotion. Notice how events, patterns, and choices converge, not randomly, but according to an underlying logic hidden from immediate awareness. The final cause is not a tangible object or conscious directive. It is the subtle architecture that orchestrates the mind's flow, the purpose you were never meant to notice, yet which quietly structures your experience. In this awareness lies a quiet revelation. life is not entirely chaotic or accidental. It is guided by patterns, purposes, and hidden causes that extend beyond conscious perception. The final cause illuminates the hidden architecture of thought, identity, and experience, revealing that even unnoticed events, reactions, and choices contribute to a larger, unseen design. By recognizing this influence, you gain insight into the subtle orchestration of your mind, perceiving life not only as a series of moments, but as a carefully guided unfolding of thought, action, and self, an invisible blueprint shaping everything you experience. The hidden architecture of your mind. As we reach the end of this exploration, you may begin to notice the invisible scaffolding that underlies every thought, emotion, and action. The mind is not merely a collection of conscious experiences. It is a vast, intricate architecture, operating constantly beyond your awareness. From the first causes shaping memory to the hidden forces directing identity, every aspect of your inner life is influenced by patterns, inherited narratives, subconscious processes, and subtle currents you may never fully perceive. The architecture is hidden, yet it quietly orchestrates the unfolding of your consciousness. Throughout this journey, each section has revealed different layers of influence, memories that rewrite themselves, emotions that decide before thought, filters coloring perception, habits and loops shaping reaction. All these elements demonstrate that your conscious self is only the surface expression of a far deeper system. Much of what you consider you exists in the background, guiding, shaping, and responding without your explicit awareness. Even choices you believe to be autonomous are shaped by inherited patterns, environmental context, and subconscious processes. The mind functions as a network where every component interacts invisibly, producing the seamless experience you take for granted. The hidden architecture is not deterministic in the sense of eliminating freedom. Rather, it defines the context in which freedom operates. By understanding the mind's unseen structures, you gain insight into why you think, feel, and act the way you do. You begin to recognize the layers of influence, accidental beliefs, unremembered pasts, inherited narratives, subconscious processing that have quietly shaped behavior. This awareness allows subtle recalibration, the conscious observation of automatic patterns, and the possibility of choosing differently, even within the constraints of invisible architecture. There is also a sense of continuity and coherence embedded in the mind's hidden design. Dreams, subconscious rehearsal, and the final causes behind experience all point toward an underlying order, a subtle orchestration that integrates the fragments of thought, emotion, and memory into a cohesive narrative. Life, in all its apparent randomness, is supported by these silent structures, and understanding them reveals a new perspective that what feels immediate and chaotic is in fact connected to deeper currents of cause and influence. Tonight, as you reflect on these hidden architectures, notice the interplay of conscious and subconscious, past and present, inherited and self-created. You are both observer and participant, navigating a landscape shaped by forces you rarely see yet constantly feel. Recognizing this hidden framework is not an endpoint, but an invitation to engage with the mind more deliberately, to notice the patterns guiding thought, and to explore the quiet processes shaping identity. The hidden architecture of your mind is vast, intricate, and endlessly fascinating, and by becoming aware of it, you take the first step toward understanding the full depth of yourself.